Today we're going to be reviewing for your quiz. The quiz is going to cover lessons 1-1, 1-2, 1-3, and 1-4. First we're going to write a verbal expression for the algebraic expression. This basically means that you're just writing out this algebraic expression in words. So I would translate the number 3 into the word 3, then translate my addition sign into a word that means the same thing as addition, so 3 plus. Again with the 8, I would write out the 8 as a word. And when you have a variable next to a number without any symbol, that means that we are multiplying. So this is multiplying 8 times x. You can write x a few different ways. You can write it with just the letter x, or you can write it out as the phrase a number. So that's something you might see the most, so I'll write it like that. So we have 3 plus 8 times a number. And like I said, this a number part has to do with representing the letter x, and that would go for any letter. Now we're going to do the opposite of what we just did and write out the algebraic expression that represents the expression in words. So this expression, 6 to the 3rd power increased by 5, we're going to be writing out as an algebraic expression. So I'm going to take the number 6. Since it's already written as a number, I can keep it as a number 6. To the 3rd power means that it's going to be cubed, so I would write a 3 as the exponent. And then the words increased by means adding, okay? So I would add 5, and that would be my answer. Now we're going to evaluate these examples using the order of operations. So if I write out the order, remember I can think of it a couple of different ways. PEMDAS, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, or just in the 4 steps that we learned about in the previous lesson. But P stands for parentheses. Since there is no parentheses in the first example, we're not going to start with that. Then E is exponents. So that will be the place we start, since 2 squared has an exponent. So 2 squared is going to be 4. And I always rewrite everything so that I'm able to reevaluate what I need to do yet. Then I look at it again. I see the operations are subtraction, multiplication, and addition. So multiplication is going to come before subtraction and addition. So that means I'm going to be doing 4 times 18, which is going to give me 72. So now I have 52 minus 72 plus 21. And since we only have addition and subtraction, the rule is to go from left to right, no matter whether subtraction or addition comes first. So 52 minus 72 is what we need to do first, since that's moving from left to right, so that gives me negative 20. Then I'm going to add that to 21 to get my final answer of 1. Now moving on to the second example, 3 cubed divided by 9. Again, I would follow order of operations, so parentheses, there are no parentheses, so exponents, there is an exponent, 3 cubed. 3 cubed would be 27, so that's going to be first. Then division is the only one left, so I'm going to divide next. And I get my answer of 3. Now for the final example using order of operations, I would have these letters that I need to evaluate. I need to plug in what the value of the letters are first. So D is 3, E is 4, so that goes in for E, and F is 2. So now that I've plugged in all the numbers, now I follow order of operations, so I start in the parentheses. And then in the parentheses, I go to the order of operations again. So exponents is going to come before multiplication. So in parentheses, I'm going to do the 2 squared first. Which is 4. Then I would follow order of operations again. And multiplication comes before addition in the parentheses, so I would multiply 3 times 4. Rewrite it to be 12. And then I'd finish what's in the parentheses before moving out, so 12 plus 4 would be 16. So I have left 16 in parentheses and the 3 outside of the parentheses. Whenever something is written like that, that means multiply. So 3 times 16, which gives me my answer, 48. Now we're going to review some properties. So the first property here, we need to name the property used in the expression 4 times p times 3. What I would do first is I'd try to figure out what p has to be to make the answer be 0 when multiplying. So p would have to be 0, because if the final answer is 0, thinking about anything times 0 being 0, then p would have to be 0. So p is 0. And then back to what I was saying before, anything times 0 is 0. So that property is called the multiplication property of 0. Now we'll look at an example of another property. If you notice, we start out with the expression 1/2 and then in brackets 2 divided by 11 minus 10, and then close the brackets. Then that now turns into 1/2. You still have the parentheses, which is just a type of bracket, or a bracket is a type of parentheses, vice versa. But you have 1/2, then you have the 2 still, but notice they did out 11 minus 10. So you get 11 minus 10 is 1. So they've done the step of 11 minus 10. So what property is that showing? If I do 11 minus 10 equals 1, or I replace it with 1, that is why it is called the substitution property, because I'm replacing the expression with the answer. Now we're going to think through 8 times 2 times 8 times 5 and try to use properties of numbers to help make this the easiest it can be as mental math. Okay, and then we're going to name the property that we used to make it easier mentally in each step. So what I would do here is I would group compatible numbers, things that make it mentally easier to do, which I see a 2 and a 5, which when I multiply together becomes 10. So let's say I wanted to make that first. I would go ahead and group it as well as change the order of it. So I would make the 2 times the 5 come first in parentheses, and then I'd keep the 8 times the 8. So if I did that, I grouped the 2 times the 5 together, and I also moved the order of the number. So it's actually using both associative properties, which has to do with the grouping, and the commutative property, which has to do with changing the order of the numbers. So since I used both of those properties, it's going to be a lot easier to do this in my head. I would do 2 times 5 is 10, and then 10 times 8 times 8, which would give me 64. So I might want to do grouping of 8 times 8 one more time, but again, that's using the associative property. So if I did that, I would justify it using the associative property. Then I would be left with 10 times 64, which in my head I can do very easily by doing 64 times 1, which is 64, and adding a 0. So I'm starting out with the expression 6 times 108, and I'm trying to break up the large number 108 to do this mentally, okay, to make it easier to do in my head. Now I'm considering using the distributive property, so I need to break up 108 into either an addition of 2 numbers or subtraction of 2 numbers. Now I'm going to go with the addition of 100 plus 8 instead of 108, because anything times 100 makes it a lot easier to work with. So now I have, instead of 6 times 108, I have 6 times 100 plus 8. And using the distributive property would mean I would take the 6 and distribute it to both the 100 and the 8. So 6 times 100 is what I would do in my head, plus 6 times 8, which makes it a lot easier to work with. So you have 600 plus 48, or 648. The goal, though, is to do that in your head and to break up the number into an easier to work with number to multiply in your head. Final example is going to be simplifying, looking for like terms to combine. So if I were to look through these, I see a few of the same letters. I have these 2 C's and these 2 D's, but then I also need to look at their exponents. So there is another C squared, okay? We have this C squared and this C squared, but there is no other D squared. There's a D, but no other D squared. So I can't combine 6D squared plus 3D, but I can combine 15C squared, right here, minus 4C squared, because they both have the same variable and the same exponents, so I can combine them. So I'm going to do 15C squared minus 4C squared. Basically, you're just taking the 15 minus the 4, and you're adding the C squared to it at the end. So 15 minus 4 is 11 C squared. And then since I couldn't combine the other 2 terms, I'm going to just rewrite them how they were given to me. So 6d squared plus 3d. I've combined what I can, and that is as simplified of an expression as I can get. So that'll be what you will see on your quiz, is an example pretty much of every one that I did on this video. Okay, so you should be plenty prepared if you watch this video.